Welcome to Echoes of the Mind. Tonight, as you drift into rest, we'll journey gently through the life and teachings of one of history's most mysterious and influential thinkers, Socrates. He left behind no writings of his own, no grand temple, no monument carved in his name, and yet, more than 2,000 years later, his voice still echoes in the minds of philosophers, scholars, and seekers of wisdom. So get comfortable, let your mind soften, and let's begin. The quiet story of a man who changed the way we think forever. Section 1. The World of Socrates, Early Life and Context. Socrates was born in Athens in 470 BCE, a time of rising power and beauty in the Greek world. The city was alive with art, poetry, and politics. Marble temples stood tall over cobbled streets. The air was filled with debate, trade, and the heartbeat of democracy, still in its infancy. Socrates grew up in a humble household. His father, Socrates, was a stonemason, his mother, Phainarete, a midwife. Perhaps in some poetic sense, the spirit of helping others give birth to ideas came from her. He received a basic Athenian education, gymnastics, music, poetry, and a little mathematics, but Socrates was never drawn to riches or outward status. He was by all accounts a strange and curious figure even in youth. Unlike the handsome sculpted gods of the Greek pantheon, Socrates was considered quite unattractive. He had a broad nose, bulging eyes, and a round belly. He often walked barefoot through the city, wore the same tattered cloak, and seemed indifferent to appearances. But within this ordinary exterior lived an extraordinary mind. As a young man, Socrates served as a hoplite, a citizen soldier in the Athenian army. He fought bravely in several campaigns, including the battles of Potidaea, Delium, and Amphipolis. His courage and endurance were noted by many. He was said to have stood motionless for hours, lost in thought, even in the cold of winter. But Socrates' true battleground was the mind. He began to question everything. What is virtue? What is justice? What does it mean to live a good life? He wasn't interested in wealth, conquest, or admiration. He was interested in truth, and most of all, in wisdom. Section 2. The Socratic Method, a life of questions. Unlike the teachers of his day, who often accepted payment to lecture on rhetoric or persuasion, Socrates claimed to know nothing. And yet he roamed the street of Athens, talking to anyone who would listen. Merchants, soldiers, poets, young men, old statesmen. But he didn't teach, he asked. What is courage? What is justice? What is love? Can virtue be taught? Through a series of gentle yet persistent questions, he would lead his companions to uncover contradictions in their own beliefs. This method, now called the Socratic Method, was not about winning arguments, but about revealing ignorance and pursuing truth. His goal was not to fill minds with facts, but about revealing ignorance and pursuing truth. His goal was not to fill minds with facts, but to ignite philosophical curiosity, to make people think for themselves. Socrates believed that knowledge begins with humility, the recognition that I do not know. In Plato's Apology, he recounts how the oracle at Delphi once declared that no one was wiser than Socrates. Confused by this, Socrates set out to find someone wiser. But again and again, he discovered that those who claimed to know the most often understood the least. Thus, he concluded, I am wiser than this man. For neither of us knows anything worthwhile, but he thinks he knows, while I know I do not. That was the root of Socratic wisdom, knowing that you do not know. This way of thinking made Socrates both admired and disliked. Young men like Plato, Alcibiades, and Xenophon were drawn to him, fascinated by his relentless mind. But older politicians and sophists, the professional teachers of persuasion, began to resent him. He questioned their authority, their motives, their claims to wisdom. He exposed the hollow pride of the powerful, and that, in any age, is a dangerous thing to do. As you begin to feel sleep softly approach, imagine the stone streets of ancient Athens, imagine the market, the agora, alive with voices and sandals on stone, and there, at the centre, stands a man, barefoot and wrinkled, smiling kindly, asking, "What is the good life?" Not preaching, not demanding, just asking, and asking, again and again, until the mask of certainty falls away, and only thought remains. In the next part of our journey, we'll follow Socrates into the final chapters of his life, his trial, his final defence, and the quiet dignity with which he met his death. But for now, rest your mind, let the questions swirl like leaves in the wind, and allow the wisdom of the past to echo gently through your dreams. As the years passed, Socrates continued his daily dialogues in the Athenian agora, asking his questions, challenging assumptions, uncovering contradictions. But in time, this made him unpopular with many in power. In 399 BCE, Socrates, now 70 years old, was brought to trial. His charges were grave, though in truth quite vague. He was accused of corrupting the youth of Athens and not believing in the gods of the city. 2 charges, but underneath them lay something deeper. Fear. Fear of ideas. Fear of disruption. Fear of a man who refused to stay silent. The trial, as recorded in Plato's Apology, was not dramatic in the way of modern courts. There were no lawyers, no cross-examinations. The accused spoke for himself, and Socrates did not beg. He did not flatter. He simply spoke his truth. He told the court that he was a gadfly, a small creature sent by the gods to sting the great horse of Athens, to wake it from complacency. He said, "I do not know, but I search. I ask questions. I challenge people to examine their lives, for the unexamined life is not worth living." He could have asked for exile. He could have begged for mercy. But Socrates did neither. Instead, he remained calm, humble, and unshaken. The jury voted to convict him. Athenian courts allowed the accused to propose their own punishment. Socrates jokingly suggested free meals at the public hall for doing the city a service. But eventually, with bitter hearts, the jury sentenced him to death by drinking hemlock. And so it was that a man who had only ever asked questions and encouraged thought was sentenced to die by the very democracy he sought to improve. But Socrates did not fear death. He had long taught that the soul is immortal, and that death is either a peaceful sleep or a journey to another place, where he might continue his questions among greater souls. As the sun set on his final day, Socrates spoke calmly with his friends. He discussed philosophy, the soul, the afterlife. Even in his last hours, he continued to teach. And when the time came, he drank the poison without protest. His final words, as remembered by Plato, were, "Crito, we owe a cock to Asclepius. Please, don't forget to pay the debt." A strange farewell, but perhaps a message that death is not a punishment, but a healing, a release from the body, and a return to truth. And thus Socrates left the world, not as a king or conqueror, but as a questioner, a seeker, a whisper in the night, echoing still. Socrates passed from the world quietly, surrounded by friends. But his ideas did not fade. In fact, his death became the beginning of a legacy that would echo for millennia. Perhaps the most important voice to carry Socrates' memory forward was that of his student, Plato. Plato was present during Socrates' final days. He was deeply moved by his teacher's unwavering calm, his love of truth, and his refusal to compromise. After Socrates' death, Plato dedicated much of his life to preserving and expanding upon his mentor's teachings. In fact, nearly everything we know about Socrates comes from Plato's dialogues. Works like the Apology, Phaedo, Crito, and Republic portray Socrates not only as a questioner, but as a moral guide, a symbol of reason, a man who refused to live a lie. But Plato didn't merely record, he developed Socratic ideas, exploring justice, politics, the soul, and the nature of reality. Plato founded the Academy, the first institution of higher learning in the Western world. It was a school not of memorization, but of thought, of logic, of dialogue, and at the heart of all this stood Socrates. As a figure in Plato's dialogues, Socrates remains alive, always questioning, always probing deeper. Through Plato, Socrates reached minds far beyond ancient Athens. His ideas became the foundation of Western philosophy. Aristotle, Plato's student, in turn, was Aristotle, and Aristotle would go on to tutor Alexander the Great and shape centuries of science, logic, and ethics. Thus, in a single line of students, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, we find the core of classical thought, a lineage that would define European, Islamic, and global intellectual history for over 2,000 years. But Socrates' influence was never just academic. His method, the idea of asking questions to uncover truth, became the basis for scientific reasoning, legal cross-examination, education reform, and modern therapy, especially cognitive and philosophical therapy. In every classroom where students are encouraged to ask why, in every debate where truth is sought through dialogue, in every quiet moment of introspection when one wonders, am I living the right way? Socrates is there, not in body, but in spirit. Though firmly rooted in ancient Greece, Socratic thinking finds echoes in other traditions as well. In Buddhism, where questioning desire and illusion is key. In Confucianism, where virtue and self-examination guide moral living. And in Christianity, where Socrates was later admired by thinkers like Saint Augustine, who saw him as a pagan saint, a man who lived with integrity even unto death. His ideas transcended religion and region because they were not bound to any dogma. They were tied to something deeper, the search for truth. And that is why Socrates still matters. He did not give us answers. He gave us the courage to ask. He taught that the good life is not found in wealth, power, or praise, but in the gentle, persistent shaping of the soul. Know thyself, the words carved above the temple at Delphi, adopted by Socrates as a personal creed, to know oneself, to live examined, to think clearly, to love truth. This is philosophy. This is the Socratic way. As we approach the final part of this journey, let's return one more time to the quiet city of Athens, to the shaded steps of the agora, where a barefoot man leans against a column, eyes curious, voice calm, asking, "What do you believe?" and listening. Ye have walked through the life of a man who never wrote a single book, and yet helped shape the way we think forever. From the dusty streets of ancient Athens to modern classrooms, courts, and mines, Socrates still speaks, not with answers but with questions. For Socrates, the greatest task in life was not to accumulate wealth or fame or even knowledge, but to tend to the soul. He believed the soul, our inner being, our conscience, our moral self, was more valuable than gold or honour, and that to neglect it, to live without thought or purpose, was the greatest tragedy. An unexamined life is not worth living, a bold statement, and yet for Socrates it was the very heart of wisdom. Socrates lived as he taught, openly, honestly, fearlessly. Even when threatened with death, he would not deny what he believed. Even when offered the chance to escape, he chose to remain. He said, "It is better to suffer wrong than to do wrong." And he meant it. This is true courage. Not loud, not violent, but still steady and rooted in the soul. In this way, Socrates can be seen as a model not just for thinkers, but for all who resist injustice peacefully, like Gandhi, like Martin Luther King Jr., like anyone who chooses truth, even when it costs them. His life teaches us that philosophy is not an abstract luxury. It is a way to live, a guide, a discipline for the heart. As you lie still, with your eyes heavy and your thoughts slowing down, take a moment to realize you are now part of this tradition. Every time you ask yourself, what matters most? Am I being honest with myself? How can I live a better life? You are thinking like Socrates. You are walking the same path, not in sandals through Athens, but in quiet moments, in the corridors of your own mind. So tonight, let these ideas settle in your heart like soft rain. Be curious, be kind, be honest, ask questions, seek truth, and most of all, examine your life, gently and often. Let Socrates be a gentle companion in your thoughts, not a loud teacher, but a quiet guide, a whisper reminding you that you are capable of wisdom and worthy of peace. Thank you for spending this quiet hour with Echoes of the Mind. We hope this time has brought you peace and planted seeds of gentle thought that may grow in your dreams. Sleep well, think freely, and always fall asleep wiser. Good night.